When Miss Hargrove told me my son wasn't allowed in the yearbook because we weren't a real family, something inside me broke. But what happened next changed our entire community. My name is Marissa Reed. I'm a 34-year-old single mother to Zaden, my incredible 11-year-old son who I adopted after fostering him for 2 years. Zaden has the brightest smile that lights up any room he enters. He's passionate about science experiments and fills our apartment with detailed drawings of inventions he dreams of creating someday. I never expected our ordinary Tuesday to become the day that would set off a chain reaction throughout Oakidge. I certainly never imagined standing behind a podium watching Principal Winter's hands tremble as cameras flashed around us. But that's what happens when a child's courage forces adults to confront their own prejudices. When I think back to Ms. Hargrove's cold eyes as she dismissed my son's existence as part of a real family, I still feel that sharp pain in my chest. But what I couldn't have known then was how my quiet, thoughtful boy would find his voice in a way that would silence an auditorium full of people and then inspire them to stand and applaud. This isn't just about a yearbook. This is about who gets to belong and who doesn't. This is about my son, Zaden, who taught an entire town what family really means. 4 years ago, I traded my social worker's office for the most important role of my life, becoming Zaden's mom. I still remember the day I met him at the Oakidge Children's Center, a shy 6-year-old with curious eyes who barely spoke above a whisper. As his caseworker, I was only supposed to find him a suitable foster placement, but something about his resilience despite everything he'd been through captured my heart completely. After 2 years as his foster mom, the adoption papers made official what we already knew in our hearts. We were family, no blood ties, just love, chosen every single day. The framed photo from our adoption day sits on our mantle, both of us with tear-streaked cheeks and the biggest smiles you've ever seen. That was the day Zaden first called me Mom without hesitation. Oakidge is what most would call a picture-perfect small town. Tree-lined streets, a charming downtown square, and a tight-knit community where everyone seems to know your business before you do. It's the kind of place where family legacies span generations. The Millers have owned the hardware store for 60 years. The Pattersons have occupied the same church pew every Sunday since the building was constructed. Tradition runs deep here, which makes our non-traditional family stand out more than it might elsewhere. Our little blue house on Maple Street isn't much, but we've made it ours. Zaden's science medals hang alongside my community college diploma in the hallway. His bedroom walls are covered with meticulously drawn blueprints and sketches, a future engineer in the making. Every Friday night, we have our ritual pizza and board game championship, which Zaden usually wins because I can never remember the rules to Settlers of Catan. When Zaden started 5th grade at Oakidge Elementary this year, he finally began coming out of his shell. Mrs. Carter, his science teacher, recognized his talent immediately and encouraged him to enter the district science fair. For weeks, our kitchen table disappeared under a mountain of charts, diagrams, and his experiment on sustainable water filtration systems. When he won first place, the local newspaper even ran a small feature about him. That article is still stuck to our refrigerator with alphabet magnets. Mom, Mrs. Carter says my project might be in the yearbook's academic achievement section, he told me one evening, barely containing his excitement as he bounced on the edge of the sofa. And she says they're doing a new family spotlight section too. Could we submit a photo for that? The pride in his voice made my heart swell. After years of feeling invisible in the system, my son wanted to be seen, to belong, to have his achievements and his family recognized alongside everyone else's. I hadn't had much interaction with Principal Diane Winters before that week, just the obligatory parent-teacher conferences where she seemed pleasant enough, if a bit distracted. A woman in her late 50s with carefully maintained blonde hair and sensible shoes, she had a reputation for avoiding conflicts rather than resolving them. "We don't make waves at Oakidge Elementary," was her unofficial motto, which I would soon learn translated to, "We don't challenge the status quo." Ms. Hargrove, on the other hand, I knew all too well. As the yearbook coordinator and longest-serving teacher at Oakidge Elementary, she wielded her 30 years of experience like armor against new ideas or changing times. A tall woman with perfect posture and reading glasses that hung from a beaded chain around her neck, she had taught half the town's parents and seemed to expect the same deference from them as adults that she demanded from them as children. I'd heard stories about Ms. Hargrove's rigid views from other parents at PTA meetings, usually whispered over styrofoam cups of lukewarm coffee. How she refused to acknowledge Tanner Williamson's two moms at the fall festival, addressing all her comments to his grandmother instead. How she'd questioned whether Jamie Chen was really from here, despite his family living in Oakidge for 3 generations. But I believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt, a habit from my social work days. Besides, this was important to Zaden, and I wasn't going to let anything stand in the way of his excitement. That Tuesday morning, Zaden spent extra time getting ready, insisting on wearing his professional blue button-down shirt and carefully combing his curly black hair. He even polished his glasses, something I usually had to remind him to do. "Do you think they'll want a photo of us in front of our house? Or maybe with my science project?" he asked, examining his reflection critically in the hallway mirror. "We can bring options," I said, already planning to take the afternoon off work to meet him at school for the family photos. "The most important thing is that we'll be together." I had no idea then how those words would be tested, or how much strength my quiet son would find in himself when our family's validity was questioned. I couldn't have imagined that by the end of the week, Zaden's definition of family would hang framed in the school's front hallway, changing Oakidge Elementary forever. Yearbook photo day arrived with perfect spring weather. The sky was that particular shade of blue that makes you believe nothing bad could possibly happen. Zaden was up before his alarm, triple-checking that his science fair medal was polished and ready to wear for his academic achievement photo. "Mom, we need to leave 15 minutes early," he announced over breakfast, methodically cutting his pancakes into precise squares. "Mrs. Carter said the family photos are happening during first period and I want to be first in line." I watched him eat, marveling at how much confidence he'd gained this year. When we first became a family, Zaden would have never voluntarily put himself forward for anything that might draw attention. Now here he was, excited to be featured not once, twice in the school yearbook. We arrived at Oakidge Elementary with time to spare. The school's brick facade was decorated with a fresh banner announcing Yearbook Week Capturing Our Community. Zaden practically pulled me through the front doors, past the trophy cases and toward the gymnasium where a photography station had been set up. Mrs. Carter spotted us immediately and waved us over. "Zaden, right on time. We're doing academic achievements first, then family portraits." Her warm smile included both of us as she adjusted Zaden's medal. "He's our star scientist this year," she told me proudly. While Zaden took his place with the other academic honorees, I waited near the family photo area where Ms. Hargrove was directing operations with military precision. I watched her checking names off a clipboard, her reading glasses perched on the tip of her nose. When Zaden finished his individual photo and bounded over to me, his face flushed with excitement. I felt a momentary flash of perfect happiness. "Next for family portraits," Ms. Hargrove called out, consulting her list. "The Williams family, followed by the Robertsons." Zaden raised his hand. "Ms. Hargrove, we're the Reed family. We signed up too." Ms. Hargrove looked up, her eyes moving from Zaden to me and back again. Something in her expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. "I have the Williams and Robertsons next," she repeated, as if Zaden hadn't spoken. I stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Zaden's shoulder. "Excuse me, Ms. Hargrove, we did sign up for the family spotlight section. I filled out the form last week." She pursed her lips, scanning her clipboard with deliberate slowness. "Ah, yes, Reed. I see it now." She didn't look up as she spoke. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. The family spotlight is only for students with real families." The gymnasium seemed to go silent around us, though logically I knew the noise level hadn't changed. Zaden's body tensed under my hand. "I don't understand," I said, keeping my voice level for Zaden's sake, though I could feel heat rising in my cheeks. "We are a real family." Ms. Hargrove finally looked up, her expression a practiced mask of professional sympathy that didn't reach her eyes. The family section is meant to showcase traditional family units, Mrs. Reed. A mother, father, perhaps siblings. We want to present positive examples for the students. It's Ms. Reed, I corrected automatically, years of similar interactions having trained me to address this particular misconception first. And I'm not sure what you're implying, but Zaden and I are very much a real family. We have the adoption certificate to prove it. Several nearby parents had stopped their conversations to listen. From the corner of my eye, I saw Mrs. Carter take a step toward us, concern etched on her face. "I don't make the rules," Ms. Hargrove said, though we both knew she absolutely did. "The family section has certain standards. I'm sure you understand." Zaden's hand found mine and squeezed hard. I looked down to see his eyes brimming with unshed tears, his jaw clenched in that way I knew meant he was using every ounce of willpower not to cry in public. "No, I don't understand," I said, my voice stronger now. "And I'd like to speak with Principal Winters about this immediately." 20 minutes later, we sat in hard plastic chairs outside Principal Winters' office, waiting while she finished a phone call. Zaden hadn't spoken a word since the gymnasium. He sat perfectly still, staring at his hands folded in his lap. When we were finally called in, Principal Winters greeted us with a professional smile that didn't quite mask her discomfort. "Ms. Reed, I understand there was some confusion about the yearbook photos," she began, gesturing for us to sit in the chairs facing her desk. I explained what had happened, watching her expression carefully. To her credit, she frowned when I repeated Ms. Hargrove's words. "I see," she said when I finished. She turned to Zaden. "I'm sorry you were upset by this, Zaden." My son nodded silently, still not trusting himself to speak. Principal Winters sighed, folding her hands on her desk. "Ms. Hargrove has been coordinating our yearbook for 15 years. She has certain traditional views that sometimes conflict with our more progressive policies. Perhaps this year we could find another way to recognize Zaden's achievements without disrupting the established yearbook sections." "That's not acceptable," I said quietly. "This isn't about disruption. It's about inclusion. It's about my son being told his family doesn't count." Principal Winters' expression turned apologetic but firm. "I understand your frustration, but sometimes it's better not to make waves. We could arrange for Zaden's science achievement to be featured prominently. Wouldn't that be a good compromise?" I looked at Zaden, whose eyes were fixed on Principal Winters, with an expression I couldn't quite read. "This isn't my decision to make," I said finally. "Zaden, what do you think?" He considered for a long moment before speaking. "Can I think about it tonight and tell you tomorrow?" Principal Winters looked relieved at the postponement. "Of course, Zaden. Take your time." That night, after a dinner neither of us ate much of, Zaden finally broke his silence as we sat on the couch together. "Mom," he said softly, "are we not a real family?" The question broke something inside me, and I pulled him close, feeling his thin shoulders against mine. "We are the realest family I know," I whispered fiercely. "Don't ever let anyone tell you differently." I woke at 2 a.m. to the soft glow of light seeping under Zaden's bedroom door. Patting down the hallway in my socks, I found him hunched over his desk, surrounded by crumpled papers, his small hands gripping a pencil with fierce determination. "Zay? Honey, it's the middle of the night." He didn't look up, just continued writing in his careful, precise handwriting. "I'm almost done, Mom." When he finally turned to face me, his eyes were red-rimmed but clear, no longer swimming with the tears I'd wiped away before bedtime. "I don't want you to fight with Ms. Hargrove or Principal Winters anymore." My heart sank. "Sweetheart, you don't have to be in the yearbook if it's making you upset. We can—" "That's not what I meant," he interrupted, something he rarely did. "I don't want you to fight for me. I want to do it myself." He handed me the paper in front of him. The top read, "What Makes a Real Family," in his neatest print. Below were paragraphs of heartfelt words, some crossed out and rewritten, some with small arrows redirecting their flow. Tear stains had dried on the paper, making some of the ink bleed. "I want to give this to Principal Winters tomorrow," he said, "by myself." I started reading, and by the third sentence, my own tears were falling. Zaden had poured everything into these words: his journey through foster care, the day of our adoption, our Friday pizza nights, and Sunday morning pancake disasters. He wrote about Mrs. Carter believing in his science project when he didn't believe in himself, and how a real family isn't about looking the same or having the same last name from birth. It's about who stands beside you when you're scared and celebrates with you when you succeed. Are you sure? I asked when I finished reading, knowing the answer from the set of his jaw. Ms. Hargrove doesn't know what a real family is, he said simply. Maybe nobody ever taught her. I pulled him into a hug. This boy, who had experienced more loss and rejection by age 11 than most people face in a lifetime, yet somehow retained the capacity for empathy that many adults never develop. Okay, I whispered into his hair. Okay. Morning arrived too quickly. Neither of us had slept much, but Zaden moved with steady purpose, carefully folding his letter and placing it in a plain envelope. He insisted on picking his own outfit, the same blue button-down from yesterday but paired with his nicest jeans and the bow tie his grandfather had given him for the adoption ceremony. "You don't have to come inside with me," he said as we pulled into the school parking lot. "I can do this part alone." The maternal instinct to protect him warred with my respect for his growing independence. "I'll wait in the car," I finally agreed, "but text me the minute you're done, okay?" I watched him walk toward the building, shoulders squared, letter clutched tightly in his hand. My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Carter. "Zaden just told me his plan. I'll make sure he gets to Diane's office safely. You've raised an incredible young man." 45 agonizing minutes passed before my phone rang. Principal Winter's number flashed on the screen. "Miss Reed." Her voice sounded different from yesterday, shaken, almost reverent. "I think you need to come to my office right away." The walk from the parking lot to the administrative offices had never felt longer. When I arrived, the door to Principal Winter's office stood open. Inside, Zaden sat in one of the visitor chairs, his posture relaxed for the first time since yesterday's confrontation. Across from him, Principal Winters was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Between them on the desk lay Zaden's unfolded letter. "Miss Reed," Principal Winters said as I entered, rising from her chair. "Your son." She paused, composing herself. "Your son has given me a lot to think about." Zaden looked up at me, a small, proud smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "He's asked permission to read this letter at tomorrow's morning assembly," Principal Winters continued. "I've agreed, but I'd like to take it a step further. With your permission, I'd like to call a press conference." My confusion must have shown on my face. "This isn't just about one yearbook or one school," she explained. "Zaden's letter made me realize how many families like yours have felt excluded, not just here, but in schools everywhere. I think more people need to hear what he has to say." Behind her, unnoticed until now, stood a woman I recognized as Tara Marshall from the local newspaper. She stepped forward, extending her hand. "Ms. Reed, I'm Tara. Principal Winters called me after reading Zaden's letter." She hesitated, then added quietly, "I grew up in the foster system, too. Never found my forever family like Zaden did. When she read me parts of his letter over the phone, I knew this story needed to be told." Zaden stood up and came to stand beside me, leaning into my side. Not for his comfort this time, but for mine. "Is it okay, Mom?" he asked. "Can I read my letter to everyone?" Looking down at his hopeful face, I realized we'd crossed some invisible threshold. A quiet boy had found his voice, and now he wanted to use it not just for himself, but for every family that had ever been made to feel less than real. "Yes," I said, my voice breaking with pride. "Yes, you can." The school auditorium had never been so packed on a Thursday morning. News of the hastily arranged press conference had spread through Oakidge with the speed only a small town can achieve. Parents stood against the back wall, teachers sat with their classes in the center rows, and in the front, a row of reporters from not just our local paper, but neighboring counties as well. Principal Winters had arranged for the press conference to coincide with the morning assembly, so all students could attend. I sat in the front row beside Mrs. Carter, my hands twisting nervously in my lap. Zaden waited backstage with Tara Marshall, who had taken him under her wing, coaching him on public speaking techniques and promising to stand beside him if he got nervous. Ms. Hargrove sat stiffly in the teacher section, her expression unreadable. Several times I caught her glancing in my direction, but she quickly looked away each time our eyes met. At precisely 9 a.m., Principal Winters approached the podium that had been set up on the stage. The murmur of conversation died away as she adjusted the microphone. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began, her voice stronger and more decisive than I'd ever heard it. "Yesterday, a student in our school taught me a powerful lesson about courage, about family, and about the responsibility we as educators have to every child who walks through our doors." She took a deep breath, scanning the crowd. For too long, Oakidge Elementary has operated on unspoken traditions that have excluded certain students and certain families. As principal, I allowed these traditions to continue unchallenged. For that, I want to publicly apologize. A ripple of whispers moved through the audience. This was clearly not what anyone had expected. Rather than explaining further, I want to introduce you to the young man whose words changed my perspective. Please welcome 5th grader Zaden Reed. The side door opened, and Zaden walked onto the stage, his letter clutched in his hands. He looked impossibly small approaching the podium, which Principal Winters adjusted for his height. Tara stood just off stage, giving him an encouraging nod. "Good morning," Zaden began, his voice surprisingly steady despite the slight tremor in his hands. "My name is Zaden Reed. Yesterday I was told that my mom and I aren't a real family, so we couldn't be in the yearbook's family section." The auditorium went completely silent. I could feel eyes turning toward me, but I kept my gaze fixed on my son. "I spent all night thinking about what makes a family real," Zaden continued, "and I wrote this letter to explain what I think." He unfolded his paper, took a deep breath, and began to read. What Makes a Real Family by Zaden Reed. Before I met my mom, I lived in 4 different foster homes. I remember all of them. In the first one, they forgot my birthday. In the second one, the dad yelled a lot. In the third one, they were nice, but they already had 5 other kids. In the last one, they told me I was just staying until they found somewhere permanent for me. Then Ms. Reed became my caseworker. She remembered my birthday was coming up and brought me a book about space because I told her once that I liked planets. Nobody had remembered something I said before. When she became my foster mom, she made pancakes every Sunday, even though the first ones were burned. She came to school when I had a stomachache, even though she had an important meeting. She put my drawings on the refrigerator with alphabet magnets. On adoption day, the judge asked me if I wanted Ms. Reed to be my forever mom, and it was the easiest question I ever answered. That day, we became a family on paper, but we were already a family in all the ways that matter. Zaden paused, and I could see his eyes searching the crowd until they found mine. I nodded encouragement through my tears. "I think a real family is people who choose each other every day," he continued. "It's who helps you with homework and holds your hand at the dentist. It's who makes you soup when you're sick and doesn't mind when you spill it on the couch. It's the people who are proud of you even when you mess up, who love you on your worst days, not just your best ones." My mom and I don't look alike, and we don't have the same last name that I was born with, but we are a real family, maybe the most real, because we had to work really hard to find each other. I think yearbooks should show all kinds of families, because then kids like me would know they belong too, and maybe kids with different types of families wouldn't feel like they have to hide it. Respectfully submitted, Zaden Reed, age 11. As Zaden folded his letter, the auditorium remained utterly silent for one breathless moment. Then Mrs. Carter stood up, applauding with tears streaming down her face. Like a wave, the audience followed. Parents, teachers, students, reporters, until the entire auditorium was on its feet. Principal Winters returned to the podium, placing her hand gently on Zaden's shoulder. "Thank you, Zaden," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've reminded us what education is truly about, creating spaces where every child feels valued and included." She turned to address the crowd. "In light of Zaden's powerful words, I am announcing several immediate changes at Oakidge Elementary. First, this year's yearbook will be completely redesigned to celebrate the diversity of all our students' families. Second, we will be forming a new inclusion committee comprised of parents, teachers, and students to review all school policies and traditions. And third, She paused, her gaze finding Ms. Hargrove in the audience. "We will be implementing mandatory diversity training for all staff members, beginning next week." From my seat, I could see Ms. Hargrove's face flush red, her eyes fixed on her lap. But what surprised me was the slight nod of her head, an almost imperceptible acknowledgement. Principal Winters gestured for me to join them on stage. As I made my way up the steps, my legs trembling, Zaden rushed to meet me, throwing his arms around my waist. "You did it," I whispered into his hair. He looked up at me, his eyes shining. "We did it, Mom. We're a real family, the realest." The cameras flashed around us, capturing the moment that would appear on the front page of tomorrow's newspaper. But in that instant, with my son's arms around me and his words echoing in my heart, the rest of the world faded away. On that stage, in that moment, we were simply a family, real, chosen, and unbreakably bound together. 3 months have passed since Zaden stood at that podium and changed our school with his letter. Sometimes when I walk through Oakidge now, it feels like a different town. The same tree-lined streets and historic buildings, but with a new energy pulsing beneath the surface. The story spread far beyond what any of us expected. What began as a local press conference became regional news, then caught the attention of a national education blog. Within weeks, Zaden's letter had been shared thousands of times online, reaching families and schools across the country. We received letters from single parents, adoptive families, grandparents raising grandchildren, all thanking Zaden for putting into words what they had felt for years. The school board meeting the following week was standing room only. Parents I'd barely exchanged pleasantries with before approached me with stories of their own non-traditional families, of moments when they'd felt excluded but had stayed silent. The unanimous vote to establish new district-wide inclusion policies was met with thunderous applause. Ms. Hargrove surprised everyone by standing up during the public comment section. Her hands trembled as she gripped the podium, but her voice remained steady. "I've taught at Oakidge Elementary for 30 years, she began. "In that time, I've seen many changes in our community and in our families. I believed I was upholding standards by maintaining certain traditions. After hearing Zaden's words, I realized I was upholding barriers instead." She turned to where Zaden and I sat in the audience. "I want to apologize to Zaden Reed and his mother. Your family is real as any I've known. My narrow definition hurt you, and likely many others over the years. I'm grateful for the opportunity to learn and to do better." The apology didn't erase the hurt, but it opened a door. The following week, Ms. Hargrove asked if she could interview Zaden for a special yearbook feature on what family means to different students. They spent an hour together in the library, and though neither would tell me exactly what they discussed, both emerged with a newfound respect for each other. Principal Winters kept every promise she made at the press conference. The redesigned yearbook arrived in June, featuring a beautiful 2-page spread titled Our Oakidge Family, with photos of every type of family in our school community. Single parents, grandparents raising grandchildren, blended families, same-sex parents, foster families, and yes, adoptive families like ours. Zaden's letter now hangs framed in the school's front hallway, alongside the district's new inclusivity statement that was directly inspired by his words. Teacher training now includes a session specifically on supporting students from non-traditional families, with excerpts from Zaden's letter included in the materials. Perhaps most remarkable was how the experience transformed my quiet son. The boy, who once hesitated to raise his hand in class, founded a lunchtime club called Family Talks, where students can share their experiences and support each other. 20 kids showed up to the first meeting. By the third, they had to move to a larger classroom. Principal Winters' granddaughter, Lily, became a regular at these meetings. Her parents had divorced last year, and she'd been struggling with splitting her time between 2 homes. She and Zaden developed an unexpected friendship, bonding over their shared experience of having families that didn't fit the traditional mold. Lily told me she never would have talked about her parents' divorce if Zaden hadn't made it okay to be different, Principal Winters told me during our end-of-year conference. He's created a space where kids feel safe sharing their real lives, not just the picture-perfect versions. Last week, as we packed for our summer vacation, I found Zaden staring at the yearbook, his fingers tracing our photo, me with my arm around his shoulders, both of us laughing at something just before the camera clicked. "You know what's weird, Mom?" he said thoughtfully. If Ms. Hargrove had just let us be in the yearbook from the beginning, nobody would have noticed. It would have just been another photo. But now, because of what happened, thousands of people are thinking differently about what makes a family real. I sat beside him, taking in the wisdom of my 11-year-old son. Sometimes the hardest moments lead to the most important changes, I said. He nodded, closing the yearbook and setting it carefully on the shelf beside his science trophies. I'm glad we're a chosen family, he said simply. It means we really wanted each other. That night, as I tucked him into bed despite his half-hearted protests that he was too old for tucking in, I thought about how courage rarely arrives in grand, dramatic moments. More often, it comes in quiet decisions. A boy writing a letter in the middle of the night, a principal recognizing her chance to do better, a teacher acknowledging her mistakes. Zaden was nearly asleep when I kissed his forehead and whispered, "Thank you for teaching me to speak up." His eyes fluttered open briefly. "That's what family does," he murmured. "We help each other be brave." As I turned off his light and closed his door, I realized that what had begun as a fight for inclusion in a school yearbook had become something far more profound. My son had not only secured our place in his school community, but had created space for countless other families to be seen and celebrated. In the end, it wasn't just about getting our picture in a book that would gather dust on a shelf. It was about rewriting the definition of family, not just for Oakidge Elementary, but perhaps, in some small way, for anyone who heard our story and recognized themselves in it. Sometimes the smallest voices speak the most important truths, and when those truths are spoken with love rather than anger, they have the power to change hearts, minds, and communities, one family at a time. As Zaden's story shows, sometimes it's the quietest voices that create the loudest change. Our definition of family isn't about who shares our DNA. It's about who shares our hearts, our struggles, and our triumphs. If this story touched you or reminded you of your own family journey, I'd be honored if you'd take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear that their family is real, no matter what shape it takes. Drop a comment below sharing what family means to you. I read every comment and would love to hear your stories. Your experiences might be exactly what another viewer needs to feel less alone. And if you want to hear more stories of everyday courage and the moments that change us, please subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. I share new stories every Wednesday that aim to inspire, comfort, and remind us of our shared humanity. Until next time, remember that you belong. Your family matters, and your voice, no matter how quiet, deserves to be heard. Thank you for watching.